There is a 4-part series about Hillary Clinton, and on one of the parts they talk about Bill Clinton and the episode that took place in the White House with Monica Lewinsky. And it's a very, for me at least, it was very moving. First you have, someone who's the president, and even though most of us in this class desire perfection from those who are above us and we respect them in some ways, he was after all human, and so he fell victim to what is considered to be one of the most intense and powerful drives that exist in all of us, especially for men, which is the sexual drive. And so him and Monica Lewinsky, of course, she wasn't without fault. She tempted him and he fell into the temptation. We are not talking about some Joe Schmo in the middle of the street that no one knows. We're talking about some guy who is on the world scene. He's also not single but married. He also has a daughter. He probably has parents, friends, a lot of people who had respected him. And so when the news broke out, if you know anything about Democrats, they are kind of gung-ho about family life and how to best protect them. In his State of the Union way back then, there was no mention of that because the story was out that he had this thing with Monica Lewinsky. He came on TV the first time and he said, "I'm sorry, but it wasn't convincing enough." So he came on TV the second time and it was a better show. He talks about going to his wife, Hillary, and sitting on the bed and having a chat with her about this. And then at the end of his conversation with his wife, Hillary, she tells him, "Well, before the news gets to our daughter, Chelsea, maybe you should go have a chat with her." And so he does. And there is something about the way he expresses the story. There is something about his voice, there is something about his body language, there is something about his facial expression. And he kind of brings me or pulls me into his world, and I kind of feel bad for him, and I feel bad for just being human. There are a couple of things about forgiveness. Imagine for a moment that the story never broke out, that it was just something in confidence, him and Monica, that's it. There was no need to repent, there was no need to forgive. And the circle of people that would forgive you would just be limited to Monica Lewinsky, or maybe just Bill Clinton, depending on who did the most wrong. But the circle kind of expands a little. The news breaks out, and all of a sudden we live in a society that has categories of right and wrong, good and bad. And unfortunately for Bill Clinton, he was found to be a little too human. And in the act of, I suppose, getting caught as being human, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, why? How could I have been so stupid? Now remember, without getting caught, you're never going to look yourself in the mirror with the sort of intensity that existed for him and say, how could I have been so stupid? Once in a while, you have pangs of your own conscience that comes about and says, maybe you shouldn't do this anymore. As I forget the fact that I had a triple bypass just a few months ago, and that's what time does to you. You begin to forget the intensity of certain experiences and you fall back and just being stupid. Once in a while, I catch myself drinking Pepsi. It's not good for me. I don't drink very much of it, maybe a couple of drops. Sometimes I catch myself having just a little too much sugar, especially in the office, I drink my coffee. And at certain moments, I catch myself saying, do you want to do this again? Do you want to end up in the hospital? Someone cutting your chest open and getting some veins from somewhere and planting them somewhere else. So sometimes you catch yourself not because of anyone on the outside. Your own experiences come forth, your own past comes forth, your own abilities to reflect come forth, and you say, okay, maybe you should stop. Most of us are not really that lucky. If you're not caught by your own conscience, you kind of just forget and you continue until someone tells you, you did too much drinking, your liver, your kidneys, you're this, you're that. Oftentimes you get caught from someone on the outside. And that brings forth the birth of conscience. It's like you look yourself in the mirror and you realize how ugly you really are. But this particular mirror came from the outside. It's a wife, it's a husband, it's a child, it's a friend, it's a parent. It doesn't really matter. It's someone posting something about you on their Facebook page. And so because all of us in this class live within the boundaries of culture, and because every culture creates its own set of laws, do's and don'ts, you have a very specific way of being wired. And so Someone in Norway, if they were to have sex outside of the boundaries of their marriage, they probably wouldn't feel anything, even if they were to get caught, because it's a different culture. It's a different software. Here in America, it's completely different. So what is bad in America is met with indifference in Europe, certain parts. There are degrees of forgiveness. If you're in a relationship and you have spent a good amount of time in that relationship, it's intense, it's intimate, people depend on you, you're responsible, you have created a lot of narratives. When you've done something that has crossed certain lines, it's going to be much more difficult for you to forgive. And it's going to be much more difficult for another to forgive you. The less intimate the relationship, you'll pass it by. It's not a problem. So when you talk about forgiveness, the first thing you need to ask is, what sort of a relationship are we talking about? If it's very, very intense and intimate, it's going to be much more difficult. And you're going to punish yourself, much more. There are two things. First, you and I live in the hands of time. One of the nice things about time is that in times of crisis, it moves very, very slow. But as the slowness goes away and you slowly begin to forget the experience, there isn't much to forgive. You forget. There is nothing to forgive in forgetfulness. As trigger points inside you are pushed and that file opens and memory pushes the experience out, once again you realize what an awful human being you are. And it's going to be very difficult for you to forgive yourself. Maybe another has forgiven you, but the ugliness of you presenting itself, shoving itself into your face, reminds you of your past. And you kind of feel paralyzed to move around for a few days, a few hours, a few minutes. The more your ability to forget, the less need to forgive. The less intimate your relationship, the less need to forgive. And it also depends on the transgression. If I catch you, for example, your essay being plagiarized, I'll talk to you in the office, not really, but let's just say, and depending on how you were raised, I'll tell you plagiarized, I've caught you, you have a 0. You can either show me the middle finger and say, F you, walk away, drop the class, or maybe not drop the class or not care. Or if your parents have raised you in a certain way, and if you have an ounce of conscience that brings about shame about you, then you're going to look at me and say, I'm really, really sorry. Can I have another chance? Whenever you transgress and you get caught, you find yourself in a good amount of poverty. I mean, it's interesting. Clinton was what, 1994? And this episode on Hulu, at least the 4-minute segment that I watched, his voice, his facial expression still contains so much pain. Sometimes you do certain things that every time you think about the things you have done, you can never forgive yourself. And it's a funny thing where he says, I can't even imagine the sort of weight she had to carry for all those years. Even when Hillary was debating Trump, she had mentioned something about him being with all these women, and then Trump shoots back saying, you shouldn't be the one to talk. I mean, look at your husband. I mean, we're talking about like 20, 30, 40 years have passed by, and just a couple of words from Trump opens all these memories, and they come forth. And Hillary, what can she say? And there is Bill Clinton, sitting on the top floor, and he looks down, and what can he say? So there are certain things that if you're reminded of, they'll come back to haunt you. One of the nice things about getting caught is, and that's one of the awful things about being a human being, you only appreciate things when you lose them. In being caught, you lose trust, you lose faith, you lose dependability, you lose care. There is so much that you lose. And even if the other person says, I forgive you, the truth is, regaining the trust and the faith and the love and all the things that come with it, it's going to take decades, maybe. And every time you pick up your cell phone and you're texting someone, your companion is going to say, and 10 years have passed by, what is this? Who is this? What is he saying? So there are lots of things to consider. The thing about doing something that crosses certain lines in a relationship, and then you get caught, in getting caught, there is so much sadness, and there is so much anger, and there is so much loneliness, and there is so much depression that are involved. And it's really, really tough to get yourself out. Your identity, your value, a whole host of things, just like it's a black hole. Everything just gets taken away from you. Because it is, to some extent, if for example I get a call that my mom has died today, that's a huge loss. Consider you have built a relationship with someone. In that relationship there is identity, there is value, right? There is all these narratives. In transgression and in getting caught, you lose the identity, you lose the value, and you have no choice but to be plunged into grief. And no one can accompany you in grief. It's a really, really difficult place to be. And the more you reflect, the more you think about it, the more punish you will suffer, the more torment you suffer, the more isolation and loneliness you will have no choice but to suffer. And even though your companion says, I have forgiven you, the truth is you yourself haven't forgiven yourself. So there are lots of different layers to consider.